They had all the cameras ready, and they said, don't face the ship. Go down first underwater. We have a speaker underwater. We're going to say action. Come up and turn around, and we're going to get your real reaction.
A pirate ship nobody wanted that's now gone forever. A director who hated children. Real blood smeared on a treasure map. And a kid who did the truffle shuffle while covered in chickenpox. This is The Goonies, the adventure film that became a cult classic despite being considered a disappointment when it first came out. Behind those iconic one-liners and treasure hunts was absolute chaos nobody saw coming. Today we're counting down 15 weird facts you didn't know about The Goonies. The production disasters, the deleted scenes that confused millions, the real shipwreck that inspired it all, and the stuff you never noticed even after your 100th rewatch. Before we dive in, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to Remember When for deep dives into the movies that raised us, and share this with a friend who still does the truffle shuffle at parties. Let's get into it with number 15. Number 15. The million-dollar pirate ship that became literal garbage. One-Eyed Willie's pirate ship wasn't CGI or a miniature model. The Inferno was a full-scale, 105-foot replica built specifically for this movie. Construction took 2.5 months of constant work, modeled after Errol Flynn's ship from the 1940 film The Sea Hawk. Over 7,000 square feet of fabric went into the sails alone. The production team built it on Stage 16 at Warner Brothers in Burbank, the second-largest soundstage in Hollywood. They constructed not just the ship, but an entire enclosed cave with a massive pool of water to house it. The scale was genuinely insane for a kids' adventure movie. After filming wrapped, the production company tried to donate it. They offered it to museums, theme parks, anyone who would take it. Nobody wanted it. The logistics of moving a 105-foot wooden ship were too complicated and expensive. So, they destroyed it. This massive piece of movie history that took months to build got torn apart and thrown away within weeks of filming ending. The brutal irony, after The Goonies became a hit, theme parks would have paid a fortune for that ship. Disney could have put it in Pirates of the Caribbean. Universal could have made it a walk-through attraction. But by then, it was already gone, scrapped because nobody saw the value in time. That incredible ship you see on screen existed for maybe 6 months total, before becoming literal garbage. Number 14. The Truffle Shuffle was filmed with a sick kid nobody knew about. The Truffle Shuffle, you know it, you've probably done it. It's one of the most iconic moments in the entire film. Chunk standing on that stump, lifting his shirt, shaking his belly while his friends mock him. What you don't see is that Jeff Cohen was covered in chickenpox, mostly on his belly, exactly where he had to expose himself to the camera and crew. He was terrified of getting fired. He was 10 years old and convinced that if anyone found out he was sick, they'd replace him. So he showed up to set, didn't tell anyone, and performed the most embarrassing scene of his life while actively ill. Years later, Jeff admitted this in interviews. If you pause the scene and look closely at his stomach, you can actually see the chickenpox marks visible on film forever. Director Richard Donner later said, "Shooting that scene was painful to watch, not because of the pox, but because of what it represented. A kid being ridiculed just to be allowed into a house." Donner said, "Humor comes from pain." And Jeff instinctively understood that even at 10 years old. The twist? Jeff Cohen became captain of both his high school wrestling and football teams. Then he went to law school and became one of Hollywood's top entertainment attorneys. He negotiated the deal that got Ke Huy Quan cast in Everything Everywhere All at Once, which won Quan an Oscar. When Quan gave his acceptance speech, he thanked his Goonies brother for life. That brother, the kid who did the truffle shuffle with chickenpox and never complained once. Number 13. Josh Brolin ruined the perfect shot by screaming an F-bomb. Richard Donner wanted genuine reactions when the kids first saw the pirate ship, so he kept the massive Inferno set completely hidden from the young cast. They weren't allowed anywhere near stage 16. The reveal would be their first time seeing it, and cameras would be rolling. The day came. Donner positioned the kids with their backs to the ship. He had multiple cameras ready from different angles. This was the money shot that would sell the entire movie. He called action, had them turn around, and Josh Brolin immediately screamed at full volume. Not a gasp of amazement. An actual curse word that made the entire take unusable. The crew went silent. Donner yelled, "Cut." The other kids were stunned, their genuine reactions now mixed with shock at Josh's outburst. They reset and shot it again. But the second take couldn't capture that initial wonder. The kids had already seen it. The magic was gone. Years later, Josh admitted he'd actually snuck a peek at the ship days earlier during filming. He'd seen it before, but still couldn't control his reaction when seeing it properly lit, with all the cameras watching. Donner kept the second take in the film, and it works. But the first reactions were apparently so filled with profanity that they needed 2 more attempts to get something usable. The genuine amazement they wanted got filtered through the knowledge that they'd already blown the first take. The scene you see in the final film was take 3 of what should have been a perfect one-shot moment. Number 12. Michael Jackson basically moved onto the set. Corey Feldman revealed years later that Michael Jackson visited the Goonies set constantly, not once or twice for a photo op. He was there so frequently that Feldman said Jackson was basically part of the cast. This was 1984 and 1985, right after Thriller had made Jackson the biggest star on the planet. And he was spending his free time hanging out with a bunch of kids making an adventure movie. Feldman described it as having the coolest set in Hollywood. Harrison Ford came by and walked through the cave sets with the cast. Dan Aykroyd visited. Pee Wee Herman stopped by. But Jackson kept coming back. The kids were 10, 11, 12 years old, working with Steven Spielberg's production company, and the King of Pop was treating their set like a second home. Feldman said Jackson would watch them film, talk to them between takes, and just hang out like it was normal. Think about that image, these child actors who would go on to become stars themselves. But in that moment, they were just kids making a movie. And one of the most famous people on Earth kept showing up to see what they were doing. The production became a magnet for celebrities who wanted to see Spielberg's latest project. But while others visited once, Jackson apparently couldn't stay away. Number 11. I Hate Children. The director who said it out loud. Steven Spielberg created the Goonies story and served as executive producer. He'd just had massive success with E.T., proving he could work with child actors perfectly. So naturally, he handed the directing job to Richard Donner, a man who, by his own admission, never liked children. Donner's first reaction when Spielberg offered him the job? Why me? He was genuinely confused. He'd directed Superman and The Omen, big adult films. A movie about kids searching for pirate treasure seemed like the worst possible fit. Spielberg insisted. He wanted someone who wouldn't coddle the kids, someone who'd push them to give real performances instead of cute kid movie acting. The behind-the-scenes documentary shows Donner constantly frustrated with the young cast. He's scolding them, getting visibly annoyed when they can't focus, struggling with the chaos of directing 7 kids who kept getting distracted between takes. There's footage of him criticizing actors harshly, at one point telling someone that what they'd done wasn't even acting. The kids got similar treatment. No coddling, no special handling just because they were young. But that frustration created authenticity. The kids in the Goonies feel real because Donner demanded real performances. He didn't let them get away with anything. The man who hated children directed one of the greatest children's films ever made, precisely because he refused to make a children's film. He made an adventure movie that happened to star kids, and that's why it still works decades later. Number 10. The 32-foot octopus, too ridiculous to make the cut. At the end of the Goonies, when the kids are being interviewed by reporters, Data says the octopus was very scary. Everyone watching in 1985 was confused. What octopus? There's no octopus in the movie. Turns out, there was supposed to be. The production built a 32-foot octopus puppet for a deleted scene, where the kids fight it off after escaping the ship. Data was meant to save everyone by shoving a Walkman in its mouth, making it dance to music before swimming away. The octopus was a disaster. It was a massive marionette with huge cables exposed all over its body. The effects crew couldn't make it move smoothly, and it definitely couldn't dance like the script wanted. Rob Berman, who helped design it, later said the concept was ridiculous enough to get itself cut. The puppet looked terrible, moved worse, and Donner made the call to remove the entire scene. Except they forgot to cut Data's line. So the theatrical release has this random reference to an octopus that never appears, confusing generations of viewers. When Disney Channel acquired rights to show the Goonies in the 1990s, they edited content but added back deleted scenes to fill runtime, including the octopus scene. An entire generation of kids who grew up watching it on Disney Channel saw the octopus and thought it was normal. Then they'd talk to friends who'd seen the theatrical version, and nobody could agree on whether the octopus was real or a shared fever dream. The creature that was too bad for the movie still technically exists in Goonies-adjacent media, though. It shows up in Cyndi Lauper's music video for Goonies Are Good Enough, directed by Richard Donner with the cast. Number 9. Spielberg secretly directed scenes without credit. Steven Spielberg's name appears on The Goonies as executive producer and story creator. Richard Donner got sole directing credit, but Spielberg actually directed scenes without any acknowledgement. The skeleton piano sequence, where the kids have to play the right notes to avoid deadly consequences, was directed by Spielberg. He was on set, saw Donner struggling with the technical setup, and stepped in to handle it himself. His touch is unmistakable throughout the film. The sense of wonder, the way the camera captures childhood adventure, the balance of humor and genuine danger all carries Spielberg's DNA, even though Donner was officially calling the shots. Spielberg was heavily involved, despite his executive producer title suggesting distance. He consulted on major decisions, helped with problem-solving when things went wrong, and contributed ideas that shaped the final film. The reason he didn't direct it himself? He was too busy. He was in post-production on other projects and developing future films. He physically couldn't commit to directing, but wanted creative control over the story he'd created. So he hired Donner, someone he trusted to execute the vision, and stayed involved enough to guide it when necessary. The collaboration worked because both men were strong enough to challenge each other while respecting the other's strengths. When you watch The Goonies, you're seeing a Spielberg film directed by Donner, with Spielberg's uncredited assistance. The best of both filmmakers combined into something neither could have made alone. Number 8. Filming in order added 5 months to production. Most movies shoot out of sequence. You film all scenes in one location together, regardless of where they fall in the story. Then move to the next location. It's efficient and saves money. Richard Donner decided to shoot The Goonies almost entirely in chronological order, the same approach Spielberg used on E.T. The reasoning was simple. Child actors benefit from experiencing the story as their characters do, building emotional connections scene by scene. But it added roughly 5 months to the production schedule. Instead of knocking out all the attic scenes in one go, they'd film the opening attic scene, then leave and come back later for other attic moments. The logistics became a nightmare. Sets had to be maintained for months instead of days. The crew couldn't move on to new locations quickly. Everything took longer and cost more money. The 5-month shoot was exhausting. The kids were pulled out of school for extended periods. The adult actors had scheduling conflicts. The crew was working constantly without normal breaks. But the payoff shows in the final film. The kids' journey feels genuine because they actually experienced it in order. Their friendships deepened over months of filming, and that chemistry translated to screen. When they're tired and scared in later scenes, some of that exhaustion is real. Donner made the expensive choice to prioritize authenticity over efficiency. And it's a major reason why The Goonies still feels so genuine nearly 40 years later. Number 7. Sloth was an NFL first-round pick with 2 Super Bowl rings. John Matuszak, the actor behind Sloth's makeup, wasn't some character actor. He was the first overall pick in the 1973 NFL Draft. First overall pick. He played defensive end for the Oakland Raiders and won 2 Super Bowl championships before transitioning to acting in his late 20s. This was a legitimate football star who'd been at the absolute top of professional sports. As a nod to his career, Sloth wears a Raiders jersey in the film. Most viewers assumed it was just a costume choice, not realizing the actor actually played for that team and had championship rings. The makeup to transform Matuszak into Sloth took 5 hours every single day of filming. 5 hours of sitting in a chair while artists applied prosthetics to his entire face and head. One of his eyes was mechanically operated by remote control. A crew member off-camera would trigger it to move independently. To synchronize Sloth's blinking, someone would count down so Matuszak knew exactly when to blink his real eye. For scenes near the water on the ship's set, they couldn't let Matuszak get wet. The makeup would have been destroyed, requiring another 5-hour session to reapply. So they carefully choreographed everything to keep him dry, while other actors got soaked. Matuszak was 6'8" and weighed over 280 pounds, an absolute giant who'd spent years dominating on football fields. Then he sat patiently for 5 hours daily to be transformed into a deformed, gentle soul who just wanted Baby Ruth candy bars. The physical opposite of his football persona became his most enduring legacy. More people remember him as Sloth than as a Super Bowl champion. Number 6. The deleted gorilla chase Spielberg, directed that nobody's seen. The original script included 2 gorillas named Bonzo and Bertha, who escaped from the Astoria Zoo. The Goonies would accidentally free them by banging on pipes, and the gorillas would cause chaos throughout the film. One sequence had them steal a golf cart from Troy and his father. Another showed them taking Troy's Mustang from a gas station and driving it. The climax would have featured the gorillas at the final beach scene. Steven Spielberg directed these sequences himself. Not Donner, Spielberg took time to film elaborate scenes with trained gorillas, actors, and stunt coordinators. Then it all got cut, every frame. The gorilla storyline was completely removed from the final film. Concept art still exists showing Bonzo and Bertha driving Troy's convertible. There are storyboards for the sequences. Production stills survived showing preparation for these scenes. But the actual footage never released. It's sitting in Warner Brothers archives somewhere, or it was destroyed. Either way, the public has never seen Spielberg's gorilla chase scenes, despite them being fully filmed and finished. The only remnant in the released film is a brief shot in the opening where you can see what was supposed to be police cars chasing the gorillas before it cuts. That's it. That's all that survived of an entire subplot. Imagine watching The Goonies and suddenly gorillas show up. It would have been bizarre even by the film's standards. Maybe that's why they cut it. Even Donner and Spielberg realized it was too much. But somewhere, fully directed by Spielberg, gorilla footage exists, and we may never see it. Number 5. Sean's famous speech was made up 60 seconds before filming. The scene where Mikey tells the Goonies about One-Eyed Willie's legend is one of the most important in the film. It establishes the myth, builds the adventure, and shows why these kids are willing to risk everything. In the script, there was a long speech explaining the backstory, but when they rehearsed it, the dialogue felt stiff and unnatural. A kid wouldn't talk like that. It sounded like an adult wrote exposition, because an adult had. Donner pulled Sean Astin aside right before they were supposed to shoot. He took him outside the soundstage and told him the story of One-Eyed Willie, the pirate and the British, the trap that sealed him in a cave for 300 years. Then Donner said, "Go tell that story to the camera, in your own words, exactly how you'd tell it to your friends." Sean walked back in, cameras started rolling, and he just told the story, made up his own phrasing, used his own emphasis, stumbled over parts like a real kid would. The performance is natural because it was essentially improvised based on a version he'd heard 60 seconds earlier. Donner used this technique multiple times with young actors. Instead of making them memorize adult dialogue, he'd explain what needed to happen and let them express it in their own voices. Number 4. The 17th century shipwreck was found in the exact same caves. The legend of One-Eyed Willie was loosely inspired by a real shipwreck off the coast of Oregon. The Santo Cristo de Burgos, a Spanish galleon, capsized in 1693 while sailing from the Philippines to Mexico. It went down somewhere near Astoria, the exact town where the Goonies is set. For centuries, chunks of beeswax from the ship's cargo would wash up on Oregon beaches. Some pieces were large enough to still show Spanish shipping marks. The shipwreck became known as the Beeswax Wreck, and treasure hunters spent generations trying to find it. The mystery inspired stories in the area, which eventually contributed to creating the Goonies, a pirate treasure hidden off the Oregon coast, lost for hundreds of years, waiting to be discovered. In June 2022, nearly 40 years after the Goonies was released, archaeologists finally found it. They discovered over 20 pieces of timber from the Santo Cristo de Burgos in coastal caves just north of Manzanita, Oregon. The timbers were analyzed and confirmed to be from the lower hull of a Spanish galleon from the right time period. The location matched historical accounts. After 329 years, the Beeswax Wreck was no longer a legend. The film that was inspired by the legend of a lost ship outlived that legend and saw it become confirmed fact. One-Eyed Willie's treasure was fiction, but the shipwreck that sparked the imagination was real all along. The caves where they found the timber are close to where tourists visit Goonies' filming location. People go to see where a fictional treasure hunt was filmed, walking near the site of an actual centuries-old shipwreck. Number 3. The production designer cut his finger and bled on the map. J. Michael Riva, the production designer, was responsible for creating the treasure map that kicks off the entire adventure. He built it carefully, aged it, but something was wrong. It looked too clean, too new, too much like a prop. He tried aging it with coffee, which helped with color but didn't add enough authenticity. A 300-year-old map would have damage, wear, maybe even blood from the pirate who drew it. Riva went to the prop department asking for red paint to add blood effects to the edges. They were out, completely out of the right shade that would look like dried blood on old parchment. So Riva, fully committed and apparently not thinking through the implications, took a knife and cut his own finger. Then he dripped his actual blood along the edges of the map. He later admitted this in interviews, saying, "You do these crazy things. You get so into it. The blood you see on the treasure map, the blood that makes it look like a real artifact from a violent pirate's past, is the real blood of the man who designed it." The map became one of the most iconic props in the film. Kids watching dreamed of finding something like that in their own attics. And the whole time, the authenticity that made it feel real came from a production designer willing to literally bleed for his work. That map lives in a private collection now, worth a fortune. and somewhere in the fibers of that parchment is J. Michael Riva's actual DNA, preserved forever in a piece of movie history. Number 2. The film that made 6 times its budget was called a flop. The Goonies was made for $19 million and earned $125 million worldwide. By any reasonable standard, that's a massive success. More than 6 times its budget, top 10 highest-grossing film of 1985. But inside Warner Brothers and Amblin Entertainment, it was considered a disappointment. The reason? Gremlins had been released the year before, also a Spielberg production, also family-friendly adventure, also Warner Brothers. Gremlins made $145 million on a similar budget. Expectations for the Goonies were set by Gremlins' performance. When it only made $125 million, executives saw it as underperforming. Not a failure exactly, but not the hit they'd expected. The film opened at number 2 behind Rambo. First Blood Part 2, which hurt its momentum. Reviews were mixed. Some critics loved it. Others thought it was too loud and chaotic. The theatrical run was good, but not spectacular. Spielberg and Donner were probably disappointed with the opening weekend numbers. They'd made something they believed in. But the audience response didn't match Gremlins' level enthusiasm immediately. The irony is that the Goonies became more popular after leaving theaters. Home video turned it into a genuine cultural phenomenon. Kids watched it repeatedly, memorized every line, and turned it into essential childhood viewing. By the 1990s, it was recognized as a classic. In 2017, it was selected for preservation in the National Film Registry for being culturally significant. It's now considered one of the defining films of the 1980s. Number 1. From box office disappointment to cultural phenomenon. The Goonies made $9 million its opening weekend, coming in second to Rambo. It went on to gross $125 million worldwide on a $19 million budget. Solid numbers by any measure. But Warner Brothers and Spielberg's Amblin Entertainment had just released Gremlins the year before, which made $145 million. Everyone involved expected the Goonies to match or exceed that success. When it didn't, the film was quietly labeled a disappointment. Not a bomb, but not the phenomenon they'd anticipated. Then something strange happened. Home video changed everything. Kids who'd seen it once in theaters watched it dozens of times on VHS. They memorized every line, reenacted every scene, and turned it into a shared cultural experience. By the 1990s, the Goonies wasn't just popular, it was beloved. Kids who grew up with it became adults who introduced it to their own children. The film that critics dismissed as manipulative and loud became the gold standard for childhood adventure. Astoria, Oregon became a pilgrimage site. Goonies Day draws 10,000 to 15,000 visitors annually. The Goonies House gets 1,500 visitors a day during summer. In 2017, the Library of Congress selected it for preservation in the National Film Registry. And in February 2025, 40 years after the original, a sequel was officially announced with Spielberg and Chris Columbus producing. The movie nobody expected to become a classic is now one of the most beloved adventure films ever made. And there you have it, 15 weird facts about the movie that almost nobody wanted but ended up defining adventure films. Which fact shocked you the most? Tell us in the comments. Hit that like button if this brought back memories. Subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the movies that raised us. Until next time.